8 F-35s shot out of the sky before a single pilot could react, and 67 Israeli soldiers died in the same 22 minutes on the ground below. That number did not arrive in a press release. It arrived in the after-action material that crossed senior desks before dawn, before the communications teams had assembled the language that would eventually reach the public, before anyone in Washington had decided which version of what happened over the Persian Gulf that morning was permitted to be told. 8 F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters, 3 MQ-9 Reaper drones, the aircraft that American doctrine had certified as the invisible, unchallenged apex of aerial combat, gone from the sky before any pilot completed an evasive maneuver. And simultaneously, 67 Israeli soldiers killed in the linked ground strike on a forward position connected to the same patrol architecture. All of it in 22 minutes. From first launch to last debrief field spreading across the Gulf, Trump's office issued a public admission within 119 minutes. Not because the response was slow, because there was nothing left to protect in the air. Stay with me, because what I am about to walk you through is not the version that survived the institutional filtering process before reaching the evening broadcast. This is the operational picture with timestamps. At 1:52 local time, the synchronized launch order reached mobile transporter erector launchers dispersed across 5 Iranian provinces in a pre-operational positioning established over weeks. The placement itself was strategic, dispersed widely enough across the geography that no preemptive targeting solution could have disrupted the launch before execution. Solid fuel motors ignited in a staggered ripple sequence. 320 missiles in the first wave rising on trajectories calculated to exploit a specific gap in satellite coverage that Iranian geospatial teams had mapped through months of commercial imagery accumulation before a single launcher moved from its garrison position. Within 22 minutes, the sky over the Persian Gulf registered the full inbound picture simultaneously across every available sensor. 8 F-35s and 3 Reapers took direct guidance-corrected impacts. The composite airframes and stealth coatings that represented the technological pinnacle of American aerospace investment gave way under penetration warheads whose terminal guidance had been refined to sub-6-meter accuracy. Not through a spy network operating inside coalition territory, not through penetration of classified systems, through months of patient accumulation of commercial satellite imagery, cross-referenced with real-time tracking of the radar and communication emissions that the aircraft themselves broadcast during normal patrol operations. The low observable profiles that billions of dollars of stealth development had produced were irrelevant to a targeting system that had already mapped every patrol route and every emission signature before the missiles left their pads. The systems designed to make the aircraft invisible became the signals that found them. We warned about this for years. In classified settings that produced reports that produced recommendations that generated further study cycles, the warnings reached flag officers. They generated the right paperwork, and the forward patrol posture continued operating on routes that had been mapped to sub-6-meter accuracy by an adversary that had spent years learning to listen to what stealth aircraft cannot help broadcasting. We sold the world on the F-35 as the invisible king of the sky that would render enemy air defenses obsolete. Yet Iran just proved that 8 of them could be swatted from the Gulf like cheap drones in a single coordinated barrage. That sentence came from an internal U.S. Navy after-action memorandum, not from a foreign commentary outlet from the institution accounting for what happened to its own aircraft in its own theater. It requires no elaboration. It stands alone as the most compressed institutional reckoning in the entire after-action record. If you found this channel today and this is your first analysis from this source, I want to be direct about what this is and why it exists. Every official statement about what happened over the Persian Gulf has already been processed through multiple institutional filters before it reached you. The language was chosen. The casualty framing was managed. The operational specifics that would allow you to understand the full strategic significance of what was demonstrated were either omitted or buried in terminology calibrated to manage public reaction rather than build operational understanding. This channel exists to distribute the picture before those filters apply. If that is the analysis you have been looking for, subscribe right now. Not at the end. The section coming next goes significantly deeper into both the targeting methodology and the global strategic consequences of what happened in that airspace, and I want you fully oriented before we get there. Now let me show you the cost exchange arithmetic that the official framing works hardest to keep abstracted from the loss figures. Each missile in the salvo represented an Iranian expenditure of approximately $350,000. The SM-6 interceptors committed by Arleigh Burke destroyers in the defensive response cost between $3 and $4 million per round. When you run the ratio that results from that comparison across a salvo density that exceeded battery magazine capacity within the first wave, you arrive at a mathematical conclusion that is not a rounding error. It is the foundational strategic logic of the entire operation expressed in confirmed figures that do not require interpretation. The first wave forced immediate commitment of every available interceptor magazine, all of it simultaneously before the second wave of 380 missiles arrived. By the time that second wave crossed the operating box, U.S. fire control teams had shifted to emergency reload protocols requiring 25 to 35 minutes per cycle under combat conditions. The third and fourth waves arrived before any single reload cycle could complete. $2.3 billion. That is the floor assessment of what was destroyed. 8 F-35 airframes at approximately $80 million each. 3 Reaper drones. The specialized avionics suite sensor integrations and stealth coding investments embedded in platforms that took years of development to field and cannot be quickly reconstituted in theater. The persistent patrol architecture that was supposed to maintain continuous airspace awareness across the Gulf corridor, gone before dawn, before a single pilot completed an evasive command, before the carriers below could scramble a meaningful response against $448 million of Iranian expenditure. That ratio is not assembled for dramatic effect. It is the confirmed cost exchange figure from the initial damage assessments, and the strategic implication of that ratio is not contained within this event. It is being integrated right now into the planning architectures of every actor that was watching. Pause here because the temptation at this point is to focus on the airframes and the dollar figures and the interceptor magazine mathematics. All of those dimensions matter enormously, but what I am about to tell you reframes every figure I have given you into something more consequential than a single operational loss. The targeting methodology that achieves sub-6 meter accuracy on a moving stealth aircraft during active flight operations over the open Gulf did not require any intelligence collection capability limited to a sophisticated nation-state apparatus. It was built from commercial satellite imagery, openly available analytical algorithms, and patient monitoring of the emission signatures that their aircraft broadcast during their own patrol operations, the patrol routes, the operational timing, the communication patterns that allowed real-time position refinement to the precision required for terminal guidance correction, all of it generated by the aircraft themselves in the course of their normal operations. The entire forward stealth and drone posture had been certified on the foundational assumption that achieving this level of targeting precision against low observable moving platforms in active flight would require classified intelligence that only a sophisticated adversary with years of high-risk collection development could build. That assumption is now operationally invalid. It was invalidated in 22 minutes over the Persian Gulf by a targeting methodology built from commercially available data and open-source tools. That is not an aircraft vulnerability. That is a doctrinal vulnerability at the level of how low observable systems are operated in contested environments. Let me tell you about Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, an F-35 pilot whose 16 years of career progression I have tracked through unclassified channels. She was leading the patrol formation when the first wave arrived. Her wingmen were maintaining formation with full professional confidence in the low observable profiles of their platforms and the layered defensive architecture operating beyond the patrol perimeter. The confidence was the product of years of training and certification, built on assumptions about what adversaries could achieve against fifth-generation aircraft in active flight in this environment. Her final log transmission described the moment before the inbound picture overwhelmed every available processing circuit simultaneously. She survived with injuries requiring months of rehabilitation. The pilots and operators around her did not all share that outcome. Their families are waiting right now for full confirmation of details that official channels are managing with careful attention to timing and what gets released. Families who had no seat at the table where the forward patrol doctrine was certified, who did not write the emission control protocols that allowed months of adversary monitoring to build the targeting package that found their aircraft in flight, who did not sit in the procurement reviews where the stealth capability was celebrated as protection against exactly the kind of targeting that was just demonstrated to work against it. They bear the cost regardless. And below those aircraft, 67 Israeli soldiers killed in the same operational sequence in a linked ground strike on a forward position connected to the patrol architecture. Families in Israel waiting for the same confirmation, the same official management of what gets released and when. Hold both those images simultaneously. The pilot watching the sky fill with inbound tracks that the doctrine said could not find her. The soldiers on the ground below, part of the same operational architecture, struck in the same coordinated sequence. 22 minutes, one operational action, two nations, both sets of families now living in the space between notification and full truth. What comes next in this analysis is where the strategic consequences leave the Gulf entirely and enter the planning rooms of actors whose scale makes Iran look like a proof of concept demonstration. And this is where the threat stops being something that happens to aircraft over someone else's water and starts being something that touches the security calculations of every nation whose safety depends on the credibility of U.S. and allied air power. Before I go there, I need to say something directly to the people watching this. The people in this channel have made a decision that the managed version of events is not sufficient for understanding what is actually happening. The analysis here reaches people because the people who watch it distribute it to others who are ready to engage with it seriously. Share this video right now with one person in your network who still assumes that stealth coatings and low observable profiles protect fifth-generation aircraft from coordinated precision attack. Not because of this single event in isolation, because the section coming next explains why what happened over the Gulf is directly connected to security decisions being made right now about Taiwan, about Baltic airspace, about every theater where U.S. and allied air power is the foundational deterrent. Russia first. The Russian aerospace forces have spent years developing doctrine for the suppression of NATO forward stealth and unmanned air assets as a priority mission in any major conflict. The specific analytical challenge has always been generating empirical data on how U.S. fifth-generation and unmanned platforms actually perform under real coordinated precision attack in active flight, rather than exercise projections against ground-based targets. The Gulf operation resolved a significant portion of that uncertainty in a single morning. Terminal vulnerability of F-35 class airframes to penetrator warheads at the relevant engagement geometries during active patrol operations. Effectiveness of commercially built emission tracking targeting methodology against low observable aircraft broadcasting their own position through necessary operational emissions. The timing offset between salvo waves that most effectively prevents any defensive interceptor reconstitution between engagements. The 4th Air and Air Defense Army is updating operational planning for NATO forward stealth and drone patrol operations along the Baltic and Black Sea sectors. Launch to impact timing windows are being recalibrated to under 25 minutes against patrol-class air targets using road-mobile solid fuel systems that the Gulf event validated as sufficient for this targeting mission at the precision demonstrated. Procurement records from the Russian Ministry of Defense show orders for enhanced terminal guidance packages on related systems increased 17% in the 30 days following the strike. That procurement adjustment is institutional response to validated performance data at a quality level no exercise environment can replicate. The quiet professional satisfaction inside certain Russian design bureaus is not triumphalism. It is the recognition of engineers who have been developing a doctrine and just received live validation data against the exact category of target their doctrine was built to suppress. The specific parameter confirmed is the ability to neutralize stealth fighter and drone surge capacity before pilots or operators can initiate effective evasive or defensive action. Now, China, and this is where the Gulf event stops being a regional incident and becomes a global strategic inflection point. The PLA Air Force and Rocket Force have been calculating for years the salvo parameters required to suppress U.S. and Allied fifth-generation air operations across the first island chain in the opening hours of any cross-strait contingency. The foundational analytical challenge has always been the targeting precision question. Taiwan and allied forces maintain fifth-generation aircraft at forward bases in Japan and across the Pacific. US F-35 and unmanned patrol operations form the surveillance and strike backbone of any allied response architecture in the Taiwan scenario. The question that has always carried residual uncertainty in PLA planning is whether commercially available targeting methodology can achieve the precision required to suppress those aircraft before they establish air superiority in the opening phase of a conflict. The Gulf operation resolved that uncertainty in the direction that is most consequential for Taiwan planning. Commercially built emission tracking targeting methodology achieved sub-6 meter accuracy on actively flying F-35s during normal patrol operations over the open Gulf against the same Aegis defensive architecture that would be protecting those aircraft in the Pacific contingency at a salvo density that exhausted the available interceptor capacity before the defensive system could reconstitute between waves using a cost exchange ratio that makes the math of sustained stealth air superiority deeply uncomfortable for any honest operational planner on the Allied side. Survivability assumptions for U.S. and Allied forward air patrols have been adjusted downward in PLA internal modeling. The DF-21D and DF-26 brigades are running salvo simulations scaled to the observed Gulf parameters with specific focus on how rapidly the stealth patrol architecture supporting Taiwanese defensive operations can be suppressed in the opening phase before any coherent air superiority can be established. Commercial satellite providers in the region are reporting measurable increases in encrypted high-resolution tasking traceable to PLA entities. That collection activity is the same patient commercial imagery accumulation methodology that built the targeting package that found the F-35s in flight over the Gulf being executed now against U.S. and Allied stealth patrol patterns across the first island chain. Beijing now holds demonstrated proof that fifth-generation aircraft broadcasting operational emissions during patrol missions can be found to targeting precision by commercially available methodology and destroyed in active flight by salvo attacks that exhaust Aegis standard defensive coverage. Not as a theoretical modeling projection, as an operationally validated conclusion from live performance data against the most capable air assets the United States has ever put in the sky over a contested waterway. 15 of 20, that number sits in the classified damage summary, not because it was selected for dramatic weight, but because it is the precise confirmed count of guidance-corrected precision strike systems that crossed into the target area in coordinated waves across the operation. And the follow-on question that sits beneath that number in every serious planning assessment is the one the official briefings have been most careful to avoid stating directly. What happens if the next salvo targets the carriers themselves instead of their air screen? That question is not rhetorical. It is the precise planning problem that the Gulf operation was designed to make unavoidable for U.S. theater commanders. Suppress the air screen, expose the carriers, then decide whether the carriers remain within range. It is a sequential suppression logic that the Gulf operation validated in the first step at the cost exchange ratio and the targeting precision level that the follow-on steps require. Saudi Arabia has already accelerated procurement of advanced precision strike systems from Chinese partners. The stated justification is protection of its own drone patrol operations near sensitive choke points. The procurement parameters tell the actual story. Systems optimized for the emission tracking targeting approach validated over the Gulf against the patrol architecture signatures visible from commercial orbit. Saudi strategic planners just watched 8 F-35s destroyed in active flight using commercially built targeting methodology. They are not going to certify a forward patrol doctrine for their own forces that relies on the same assumptions that failed in 22 minutes. Turkey has commissioned fresh vulnerability assessments for its forward fighter groups along the eastern frontier, with planning documents that explicitly reference the 8 F-35 losses as the new baseline threat model for what commercially targeted precision salvo attack achieves against fifth-generation aircraft in active patrol operations. Turkish air doctrine is being updated with the Gulf parameters as the primary data point. India has expanded back-channel discussions with U.S. contractors on hardening eastern drone operations against Pakistani ballistic threats, while simultaneously updating its own stealth patrol and mission control protocols based on the vulnerability demonstrated in the Gulf. The procurement and doctrinal adjustments India is making incorporate both the ground strike lessons from the Jordan and Kuwait events and the air superiority lessons from the Gulf in a combined force protection reassessment that is accelerating on all tracks simultaneously. Each government is performing the same uncomfortable arithmetic in private channels that no official joint statement will articulate for months. If US F-35s can be destroyed in active patrol flight using commercially built targeting methodology and a cost-exchange ratio that Iran can sustain, what does that mean for the credibility of Allied air superiority guarantees in any theater where a comparable adversary has the patience and the commercial imagery budget to build a comparable targeting package? The discomfort is real. It is spreading simultaneously across every Allied capital that has structured its defense investment and diplomatic posture around the assumption that U.S. fifth-generation air power, once airborne, cannot be effectively engaged by regional powers operating within the cost exchange constraints that conventional defense budgets impose. That assumption just failed in 22 minutes over the Persian Gulf. Let me acknowledge the analytical complexity that honest assessment requires before we move to the outlook, because this is not a simple picture, and the people watching this channel deserve the complexity as much as the conclusions. The F-35 remains an extraordinary platform across multiple combat dimensions when operating from secure bases with intact support infrastructure and full mission systems integration. Its sensor fusion architecture, its ability to operate inside contested airspace with situational awareness margins that no fourth-generation aircraft approaches. In a fair engagement with supporting architecture intact, it represents a genuine qualitative advantage that no current adversary can replicate. Iran cannot contest U.S. air power in a symmetric engagement. Their conventional naval projection remains constrained. Escalation carries real economic and strategic costs for Tehran that sustained operations against a fully mobilized American response would amplify rapidly.